We are not in the bird's nest
We're
at
not.
Oriole Park at Camden Yards because we are at Orioles spring training down in Sarasota, Florida at Ed Smith Stadium. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Matt Bonaparte. Bones, we're here. It's baseball season. There's baseball weather. Baseball players.
It's beautiful.
Baseball coaches.
I wish you guys
Baseball people.
could see what we're looking at right now. Just a beautiful baseball stadium. It's picture day here. We're watching everybody get their pictures taken. It's like high school all over again.
And to be fair, we did try to show you what we are looking at
made
here
an effort.
at Ed Smith Stadium, and the lighting was absolutely terrible. Although I suppose people probably would have rather seen the field than seen us. But I don't know if that really works well.
Well, that would have taken their concentration off the topic. So
that's true.
I'm okay with this.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of topics today. We're here at spring training, so it's going to be a lot of what we have seen, what we have heard. So let's start with maybe not the biggest takeaway, but just something that we have felt being here. Corbin Burnes is here, and he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, and he's on this baseball team, and that's really
walking in the clubhouse and seeing Corbin Burnes' nameplate on the lockers. I mean, come on, that was incredible. Meeting the guy, what a nice guy. And it's crazy just to walk around the bullpens and like you're watching a Cy Young Award winner. Yeah. Pitch. It's fantastic.
And the Orioles have a couple of those guys that have that sort of upside. Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez, but Corbin Burnes is
he's the real deal.
Star.
Yeah.
I mean, it is an Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson type of player that has been added to the Orioles starting rotation, and he has a presence.
Yes, he does.
You feel it when you walk around the complex. Like that's Corbin Burnes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's real. The Orioles actually traded for him. That's a thing that happened, and you're going to see him pitch every fifth day, and that's really cool.
We watched him throw a bullpen yesterday, and that was just really cool. Watching him just pop the glove, it was fantastic. And he's going to just add so much on the field and off for this team.
Yeah, not much news to report with Corbin Burnes other than the fact that he is here. That trade actually happened, and we
can
watch
confirm
Corbin Burnes
he is here
every fifth day. Let's talk about one of the bigger topics and one of the biggest camp battles thus far, and that is the fourth outfielder spot.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're not going to learn a ton before games start. We're just seeing live batting practice. We're seeing fielding drills and things like that. We know the conversation more than likely may come down to the Orioles' two top prospects in those outfield spots in Colton Cowser and Heston Kjerstad. But, Bones, at least from what we've seen so far, Kyle Stowers is not going away.
Kyle Stowers in live ABs was really good. I mean, he was hitting the ball all over the ballpark.
Left on left.
Left on left as well, and that's something that I think Brandon Hyde and the rest are really testing a lot of the lefties on. We saw CNL Perez face off against Jackson Holiday as well, and CNL Perez looked pretty good. But Kyle Stowers, you're right, is not going away. He's just proving once again that you can't forget about him. Yeah, he got hit in the face with a pitch and it ruined his season, but he's still one of the most talented players in the organization, and he's here to prove that.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is somebody who made the opening day roster last year. And I think a lot of people, fans and otherwise, have kind of left Kyle Stowers out of that conversation for somebody who could make the opening day roster in 2024. And I don't think that was necessarily fair to do. I think we're probably guilty of it as well, not talking about Kyle Stowers as much as we should be, because clearly he had the talent to make the team out of camp last year. This is a former second-round pick.
Yeah.
He put up great numbers in AAA last year when he was healthy and able to play, and you don't want to just completely write off the season and say that it was a lost year and you can't take anything from what Kyle Stowers did in 2023. He did struggle at the big league level, and you have to note that when you are looking at guys that could potentially take that fourth outfielder spot this season. But so did somebody like Colton Cowser.
Yes.
Colton Cowser, a little bit younger, obviously the fifth overall pick in the draft a couple of years ago, has probably a higher upside than somebody like Kyle Stowers. But Stowers could still be a really solid platoon bat. And if he's hitting lefties well, maybe he doesn't just have to be that. He can be a solid defensive replacement. Probably not going to see Stowers in center field, which hurts him a little bit. But if he continues to put together good ABs here in spring, I think he is well within that conversation and closer to that opening day roster than we've been giving him credit for.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that maybe we haven't been talking about him as much as we should, but I think that's just a testament to the other names that the Orioles organization pushes forth. I don't think there's a lot of other teams who have a pretty highly touted prospect and Stowers come up, and then two who are even more highly touted follow him in Kjerstad and Cowser. So his competition is probably more difficult than a lot of other players in his position, but still a very talented player and one that definitely has a chance at making the opening day roster.
Yeah, and you mentioned Heston Kjerstad. We saw him in live BP yesterday hit an absolute rocket ship.
Yes.
Like, the ball just sounds different coming off of Heston Kjerstad's bat. And I think if he makes this team, again, we have talked about this outfield conversation a lot.
Yeah.
If Colton Cowser is the fourth outfielder, it's most likely because they need a defensive replacement in center field and left field and right field, anywhere you can get him. If Heston Kjerstad makes this opening day roster, it's going to be because of the bat. And I think that's been apparent so far. The bat is as advertised.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we've mentioned many times, he's more of the right field first base kind of bat, and being a lefty helps, as Cowser is too, and so Stowers. But Cowser is just a different kind of player in terms of his defense. Can play all over the outfield, while Kjerstad is the corner outfielder, first baseman kind of guy.
So not to keep going back to that Cowser-Kjerstad conversation, we have had it many, many times. But we did have an interesting conversation yesterday with Jorge Mateo, who arrived to camp, and we found out that not only has he been taking a lot of reps at shortstop in the offseason, but he's been taking a ton of reps at second base and a lot in center field. We asked him how often he's been working in center. He said about 5 days a week.
He said 5 days a week, every week throughout the winter he's been playing center field.
So that doesn't sound to me like somebody who is expecting to just be a shortstop.
Yeah, he's not backing down.
Last year, he played 2 games in center field and was primarily a shortstop for 2023. In 2024, if Jorge Mateo makes this opening day roster, I don't think he's really a shortstop at that point. It sounds like he's going to be playing some shortstop. We know there's playing time available at second base. And if somebody like Colton Cowser doesn't make this opening day roster and you need a backup center fielder, Jorge Mateo just might be that guy.
And we heard a lot from Brendan Hyde. 2 days in a row, he talked about Jorge Mateo's versatility and what he can do in the outfield and how well he can play out there. And he's one of the best athletes on this team and definitely one of the most versatile defenders on this team. And he played a little bit of center field last year against the Mets and the Astros.
He did it in San Diego, too.
Yeah, and he played pretty well. So I think that he definitely has a chance to make this team not as the traditional second baseman that we've seen in years past, but as a shortstop, but as a utility player who can play both the middle infield and center field.
Yeah, and I do think that changes the outfield calculus a little bit, because when you are looking at the group of outfielders that could potentially crack this opening day roster, we kind of grouped them, as mentioned before, as, somebody like Kjerstad is going to really be bringing the bat, but he can really only play a corner outfield. And then guys like Colton Cowser, Ryan McKenna are going to be your more prototypical, okay, they can play anywhere in the outfield that you need them to as a defensive replacement. Does Mateo having the ability to play center field change that calculus of whether or not you really need an outfielder as your fourth guy that can play every single outfield position?
I think it absolutely does.
Yeah.
When you fold him into the mold there, and you look at all your options now, and you know that you have a guy who's an established big leaguer in Jorge Mateo that now you can throw into center field, it definitely throws a wrench into Cowser and Kjerstad's plan into making this team on opening day, because there's just that much more competition.
Yeah, and I think, when you were looking at Mateo specifically, you've got him as a center field option. You have Austin Hayes as a center field option if Cedric Mullins needs an off day. And if you have both of those guys, you don't necessarily need a fourth outfielder that can play every single position in the outfield. So I think that bodes well for somebody like Heston Kjerstad, who played really, really well last season, established himself with the bat, but he's probably only going to play right field at Camden Yards and right field, left field at away ballparks. So I think Mateo having that positional versatility maybe hurts Cowser McKenna and helps Kjerstad.
Yeah, and Kjerstad's got his own troubles with Ryan O'Hearn at first base. That's a difficult competition.
Fills a very similar role.
Yeah, so, they're both now facing a big leaguer in their way, which before, for Cowser at least, wasn't necessarily the case. So it's a difficult road for any of those guys now.
Yeah, and again, this just is a testament to the amount of talent that is here at Big League Camp. When we're talking about somebody like Colton Cowser, who is the 19th ranked prospect in all of baseball according to MLB Pipeline, is MLB ready, and just we're not sure exactly what spot he fits into. I don't think there's a lot of other teams around the league that would be having a similar conversation of where to put Colton Cowser. I think most teams around baseball are just starting him in the outfield somewhere, but this is just the kind of talent that this team has right now.
Yes, and again, as we've said many times, it's a good problem to have, but still a problem.
So the fourth outfielder spot, of course, one that we will look at throughout spring training, and we will probably be having many more conversations about this topic moving forward. We've also seen a lot of new bullpen arms and just a lot of new names here in general. Mike Elias has been working on the margins over the last few weeks, bringing in a lot of guys that maybe profile as depth pieces here and there and could maybe factor their way into the big league roster at some point this season. We've seen infielder, outfielder, hybrid types like Nick Maton. We've also seen a couple of relievers that have been brought in, two high upside guys in particular in Matt Crook and Caleb Ward.
Yeah, Matt Crook and Caleb Ward, both guys that come within the AL East. Crook from the Yankees, Ort from the Red Sox. And you don't know what they're going to add on opening day, but you don't know what the Orioles can do.
Yeah.
You know, they can turn anybody into anything.
A lot of strikeouts are going to come from those two guys. I mean, if you want to look at some crazy numbers, look at Matt Crook in the minor leagues. His strikeout numbers, ridiculous. He's up towards a 30, 40% strikeout rate.
And he does it throwing
minor leagues.
88 miles an hour.
Yeah, he also walks a ton of people.
Yes.
The walk rate was really, really high. We have seen that from Orioles pitchers in the past. Somebody like Yennier Cano, really high strikeout numbers, really high walk numbers. Felix Bautista, really high strikeout numbers, really high walk numbers. Like you mentioned, he's not going to pump 100 like Felix Bautista. Matt Crook tosses about 88 miles an hour and is still able to strike everybody out. I think he's a really intriguing arm because you just lost a lefty in DL Hall. Matt Crook is a lefty who can strike everybody out. That's what DL Hall gave you. A similar thing, different pitching profiles because DL Hall had the lights-out fastball and the really good slider, whereas Matt Crook isn't going to overpower you with anything. He's just more of a finesse type of pitcher. But in terms of what they give you, it's lefties that strike a bunch of guys out and have trouble with walks.
Yeah, and I think the Orioles are becoming a little bit more comfortable taking those guys, knowing that they've had success, turning them into really successful big leaguers like Felix Bautista and like Yennier Cano. So they're willing to take a risk on really low-risk players that they didn't give up a ton for, and they're willing to give them a tryout basically in spring training and see what's what, and if they can kind of mold them into a high strikeout guy that they can rely on later in games or even just middle of games. So if those guys can follow the Orioles mold and if they can get their hands on them and really make them the player that they want them to be, they can become incredibly effective and turn into a type like Danny Coulomb we saw last year come out of nowhere and be incredibly effective and important for this team. So with Bradish and Means going down on opening day, and you slot in Wells and Irvin into the rotation, the bullpen has two more spots. So they're going to try out whatever they can.
Yeah, and let's talk about one guy in particular that has jumped out to a lot of people here at spring training and could be in the competition, again, more so than we thought, for those two final bullpen spots that we're presuming are available. That's Wanderson Charles.
Yeah.
Stuff guy, Wanderson Charles.
Wanderson Charles was a pretty highly ranked prospect for the A's. Didn't work out for him. He didn't get to play in the minor leagues in 2020, of course. Got thrown off the path a little bit. Orioles bring him in, and he has pretty electric stuff, like you said.
Yeah.
Really, really great fastball, and he played in Bowie last year and had a low 2 ERA, I want to say about 2.35. He played really, really well, got up to AAA where he struggled a little bit, but I think this is another guy like Felix Bautista and like Yennier Cano who has the potential to come up and make a real difference in the Orioles bullpen. Now, whether or not he does probably hinges on his control and whatever else that the Orioles need him to get under control, but this is a guy with a lot of potential and somebody to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, it feels similar to the Cano and Bautista conversation.
Yes.
Because when Felix Bautista was first protected and added to the 40-man roster, the Orioles wanted to make sure he wasn't eligible for the Rule 5 draft. It was kind of like, what?
Yeah.
Because you looked at the numbers, and there wasn't a ton there with Felix outside of the strikeout numbers. But the question was, can he put the ball in the strike zone?
Yes.
Because he was walking so many people, but the stuff was just electric. Yennier Cano, a similar type of conversation where you always looked at the roster and you said, oh yeah, Yennier Cano's still on this roster. The Orioles are holding on to him for one reason or another. And it seems like Wanderson Charles kind of falls under that category a little bit, where you're looking at the roster, you're looking at some of the talented arms down in the minors, and you're like, oh yeah, Wanderson Charles is still here.
Yes.
That's a guy that the Orioles got for, basically nothing. And you're looking at him and you're like, oh yeah, he's here. I guess the Orioles are liking something about him to keep him on this roster, to invite him to big league camp, to have him potentially be part of their future here. And I think we could see a similar path to somebody like, not going to say that Wanderson Charles is going to be an all-star, not projecting him to be that elite of a bullpen arm here.
But at the same time,
But he's
you didn't
got great
think Cano
upside.
would be either.
Right.
And nobody did. I mean, at the beginning of the season when Cano was in some conversations, everybody was like, whoa, who is this guy?
Yeah.
And now we're in a position where if the Orioles take a flyer on a guy and give him a shot, maybe where other teams wouldn't, you trust them because they see something that other teams and media and fans alike probably don't. So Wanderson Charles is a guy you should maybe not expect to be an all-star, but expect to be more than he is right now.
Yeah, and as games start up here in a few days, I think Mortensen Charles might
He's going to
be
get some
turning
play,
some
I
heads.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the starting rotation. That has obviously been a big topic of conversation as we heard the injury news about Kyle Bradish and John Means. Tyler Wells and Cole Irvin, we are assuming, are going to slot into those two roles. Tyler Wells, not many question marks there. I don't think. Really the questions were, was he building up as a starter or a reliever in the offseason? Seems like he just built up for as many innings as he could pitch. Tyler Wells anticipating that, whatever role he is in, whether it was a reliever role with the Burnes trade, and we didn't know about the injuries yet, or if it was going to be a spot starter type of role or just flat out a starting pitcher, he was going to work as if he was going to be a starter. So he was built up, and Tyler Wells, at least from what we have seen so far from his bullpens, he's going to give you a lot of what he gave you last year. And again, don't forget, he was the best starter in this rotation for the first half of the season, had the best whip in the American League?
Yes, he did.
In the first half of the season. So Tyler Wells filling into that role, again, probably not many teams better suited in baseball to have one of their starters go down when you have somebody like Tyler Wells available. Cole Irvin had more question marks, I think.
Yes,
because
definitely.
You look at the overall numbers from last year, and Cole Irvin didn't have a fantastic season. Pitched really well down the stretch, had a 2.40 ERA after August 1st. But there were some questions when both Bradish and Means are presumably out for opening day. Is Cole Irvin going to give you what you would need out of a number 5 starter? And what we have seen and heard from Cole Irvin so far would point towards the good end of that spectrum.
Yeah, we talked to him yesterday, and he talked about how he added a cutter near the end of the season.
Yep.
And at first, the team was like, oh, we don't know about this cutter. And then it started working, and everyone was like, all right, let's talk about this cutter.
Yeah.
And incidentally, he throws it similarly to Corbin Burnes, so I'm sure that'll help him.
Yeah, same grip.
Which is pretty freaking cool, especially for Cole Irvin, who gets to go walk over to Corbin Burnes and say, hey, let's talk about this cutter.
Yeah.
But Cole Irvin, I mean, what a great back half to the season. Acquired really early in the year, had some question marks on him, and then was a dog for the Orioles down the stretch. And this is a guy who, like you said, had more question marks on him, but honestly somebody I'm going into the season with a decent amount of faith in to rise to the occasion and be a starter for this team, at least for the beginning of the season while the Orioles are dealing with some injuries. Cole Irvin could really be, this is his opportunity to shine, and I think there's a good chance he takes it and runs with it.
Yeah, told us yesterday, too, that he came into last season a little bit overweight, dropped 12 pounds this offseason to come in better shape. And we saw him throwing live BP yesterday. Looked good.
He looks locked in. And something else he said was that when he was with the A's, he was a little comfortable. He maybe came into the season, like you said, a little bit overweight. And when he got to the Orioles, he had to play catch-up because it's a clubhouse that is, they want to win. Everybody's in shape. Everybody's getting it done. And Cole Irvin maybe was admitting that he wasn't there when he came over. And now, in this offseason, he absolutely is there. And like you said, and like I said, he looks locked in.
Yeah.
And I think this is really a great opportunity for him.
This is a 101-win team last year.
Yeah.
And Cole Irvin's spot was not guaranteed at any point, especially before the news about Bradish and about Means. Yes, we were penciling Cole Irvin into the bullpen as, the long relief type. He had a fantastic, stretch run last year to end 2023. But Cole Irvin was not one of my locks in the bullpen. And I think that Cole Irvin probably felt that in the offseason, where this is a really competitive team. He was in and out of the rotation last year. He made starts down the stretch more so out of necessity than the fact that he was putting up great numbers. So maybe the pressure was on a little bit. So he comes into camp in better shape, and it was working on that cutter a lot. And he's got the cutter-sinker combo that can work really well. So Cole Irvin, I am definitely excited to see what he brings in spring training here. I would pencil him into the starting rotation right now as the Orioles' number 5 starter. I think most people
Barring
probably
a
are.
move or something,
Right.
I think he's your guy.
Yeah, unless they bring in somebody that I mentioned before, like a Michael Lorenzen
Yes.
type of player who fills a similar role to Irvin. I would imagine that Irvin is your 5th starter on opening day, and it seems like he is taking that potential role very, very seriously.
Agreed. I absolutely think he's the guy.
Topic of spring training, Jackson Holliday.
Yes.
We've got to talk about what we have seen from him so far. It's nothing short of impressive.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Well, the thing that I notice about Jackson Holliday is that he carries himself like he's a 10-year vet.
Yeah.
You know, and probably helps because his dad has had a fantastic career in the
over
majors.
a 10-year vet.
Yeah, he's a fantastic player, 7-time All-Star
Yeah.
Matt Holliday. But I think that Jackson Holliday is a guy that's going to fit in really well with this clubhouse if he makes the team on opening day. And, you know, talent aside, he's a guy you want on your team. He's very, loose, comfortable around the guys. And I think that probably helps that he came up with most of them, too.
Yeah.
So the Orioles have that going for them. But in terms of his play, we talked to Ryan O'Hearn, and he said he's got a perfect swing. How many guys can you say that about?
Like perfect swing.
Perfect swing. I mean, from a guy who's a really good hitter in Ryan O'Hearn, so that's pretty high praise. But, all we've heard is good things. And, he's the number 1 prospect in baseball, so that's what you'd hope. But all we've heard is that he's a great infielder. He can really play defense very well, and he's got that perfect swing. Yeah, I think the hype is real with this kid.
And we have heard in the clubhouse, too, just how impressed everybody has been with how he carries
Yes.
himself. Nobody thinks that kid is 20.
And that's what we heard.
He doesn't carry himself
That's
like
what we heard midway through the season when we were going to Bowie and other places, is that when he rose through those levels, people were saying, yeah, that guy's an awesome teammate.
Yeah.
Everybody says it. So I think this is a guy you should be really happy about.
And also just being here in person, Jackson Holliday was tossing some weight this offseason.
Yeah, that's true.
Last year, if you were looking at Jackson Holliday and his jersey looked like he was swimming in it a little bit.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not the case
Not anymore.
longer. Yeah.
Jackson Holliday bulked up this
absolutely.
offseason. And I suppose that's kind of a thing that we should have expected as somebody who was just 19 years old, is now 20, is bulking up a little bit more. He bulked up a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, an article from the Baltimore Sun saying that he's benching like 315, I think.
That's unbelievable.
Squatting
honestly.
like
You look at him and you think there's no
445.
chance. Yeah, that's just crazy.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He is a lot bigger than he was last year.
Yeah,
and if you
mean,
had question marks about, his size, if he was mature enough physically to be at the big league level, I think he has very much answered that so far.
I agree. He's almost unrecognizable in terms of his build.
Yeah.
The guy's huge. So, I mean, just more good things that we have to say about
Yeah.
him. There's nothing, I can't pick on anything for him.
Speaking of huge, last player I want to touch on here, Samuel Basallo.
Massive human being.
That's a dude.
Large human being.
That's a dude. If you just walked around the clubhouse and said which one of these players is 19, Samuel Basallo is probably
not on the
one of
list.
the last guys that I would point to.
Yeah, no, I
and
agree.
say that dude's 19. That's a big kid.
Yeah. And he was catching bullpens, not throwing, obviously, due to the injury that we heard about.
Yeah.
But he's right in the mix, and it's good to watch him play baseball because it's something I hadn't done, and probably some others hadn't.
Great to get to talk to him a little
yes,
bit.
Nice kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, 19 years old, that big. I mean, what the front office sees in terms of potential just by looking at the guy.
And a great, valuable experience for him, too. Getting
Absolutely.
to be able to talk to guys at the big league level, see what it takes to get to this point. We're not expecting Samuel Basallo to make an impact on the big league roster in 2024. I don't think the Orioles are expecting that either. He's more than likely going to start the season in Double-A Bowie. If he has a great year, maybe we see him at Triple-A Norfolk around halfway through the year. I threw out the possibility that he could be a sort of September call-up if the Orioles needed him and wanted to make a push. I don't think it's going to happen. It would be really cool, but it would be shocking.
Some weird dominoes would have to fall for that to occur.
Yes, and he would have to absolutely
And
light the world
that
on
whole
fire.
time he'd have to be mashing, which, listen,
Very possible.
he never hasn't.
Right.
So that's a possibility, but a new level for him. He did hit a couple home runs in Bowie before the season ended, but he'll start the season in Bowie. We'll see where he goes from there, but hopefully he ends up in AAA.
Yeah, just cool to see him here.
Yes, absolutely.
It is cool to have him. It's cool to know that he is getting the experience from these big league coaches, trying to gather as much information as he can from these big league players. that's going to be really valuable for somebody like Samuel Basayo down the line, and it's just fun to get to see him play.
Agreed.
Well, that'll just about wrap things up for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest here at Ed Smith Stadium down in Sarasota. Thank you so much for following along with our coverage down here. We hope you've been enjoying the videos and the pictures. We're going to be bringing you as much as we possibly can here over the next few days. Don't forget the spring training report is starting back up on MASN Thursdays at 7 p.m. with myself, Brett Hollander, and Melanie Newman. We'll be bringing you all of your spring training news from your Baltimore Orioles. For Matt Bonaparte, I'm Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.